Where is that book?
Yes, give the page, which is titled Waves of Popular Protest. It will give you the historical context of how this whole protest started. There was price rise, there was unemployment, and then part of it was attributed to the fact that there were people who had settled there since 1951, and there were protests against that. That look, these are outsiders, so these are the others. And the agitation reached such a crescendo that it led to huge violence. I mean, the Delhi massacre in 1983 was as bad as any massacres that have happened since. In fact, the agitationers said, we would rather give our blood, but we will not give our oil. Why? Because production of oil was in Assam. And there was they stopped the production of oil. Production of oil fell. Only 3 places they produced oil: Gujarat, Bombay High, and Assam. Transportation was stopped. Killings took place. Children were killed. In 1983, Mrs. Gandhi decided to have an election. It was opposed. 2% of the people voted in that election. And a person with 17% won the election. There was again a huge protest. I'm talking about 83. Why this 85 happened? When Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated in October. The demand was that 1951 onwards, everybody who was a non-Assami who had come in should be thrown out. This was not agreed to. Mrs. Gandhi got assassinated in October 1984. Rajiv Gandhi then said, let's try and compromise this issue. In the meantime, Prafull Mahanta became the chief minister. And in the 2 years, 83 to 85, they got discredited. The movement, became weak. And the 85 Accord. Mrs. Gandhi always said, let's keep 1967 as the cutoff date. The learned solicitor rightly said, because of the 66 electoral roll. And 67 was the election. They did not agree at that point in time. But in 1985, when Rajiv came to power, he said, no, there should be give and take. And therefore, this cutoff date was agreed to. And therefore, the 1966 to 1971 period was dealt with separately. And the other period was dealt with separately. That's the genesis. Now, the first submission that my learned friend gave, he gave you population figures. Those figures cannot possibly be relied upon one way or the other, because you don't know the genesis of the migration. And even their figures show that after 71, the Muslim population has been reduced. Therefore, yes, the rate of growth has been reduced. So the point I'm making is I'm on the first point, of the Article 29 point. That has no constitutional basis. But we're not talking about people coming from outside or coming from inside. We're saying that in any event, in terms of 29, you'll have to show infringement. And their infringement is only change of demographics. That's why they show the population figures. Change in demographics cannot be the basis of an infringement of Article 29. Cannot ever be. Unless, it's very interesting. In fact, if you ask me, Assam perhaps is the most multicultural, multilinguistic, the most diverse state perhaps in the country. And culture. Diverse culture. Of the 10 or 11 petitioners that my learned friend pointed out, each of them represents a separate culture. Nobody says that that's been infringed. That's not their case. So it's a very slippery slope to address this issue on the basis of demographic change. But this is the march of history. You can't stop this. And at that point in time, Parliament said, why should we stop it? These are our own people. For those Muslims who left India and went to Pakistan, and they wanted to return India, there was a whole different process. That's included in section 5 and 6, in article 6. Whole different process. Because we did not want them back. Here we were welcoming them because these are people of our own ethnicity. So this was an act that was recognized by the then government and allowed to happen. But they did not realize the kind of opposition that will emerge as it did in Assam. It happened in other states, but it happened in Assam.
So essentially the Assam Accord was that 71 onwards,
Yes.
nobody would be protected.
Correct.
51 to 66 and 66 to 71, people who came in would be protected, basically.
That's right.
51 to 66, no questions asked.
Right.
66 to 71, you got to satisfy the...
That's correct. Now, if you look at really migrations this way, for example, when the Vietnam War took place, kind of the Vietnamese people that were settled, these are all foreigners. You look at the German the Turks who have now been given citizenship, when the Germany tweaked its constitution. It's tweaked its constitution. It never allowed this to happen before. So Mexicans, there's a special provision of the Mexicans in the US. So the point that I'm making is that's the decision of the political process which allows this to happen and then makes a provision for it under the law. And there's no basis for challenging it other than the ground that it is discriminatory. But this was a non-discriminatory recognition. Not based on sex, not based on race, not based on caste, not based on religion, not based on on no prohibited...
Place of residence, yes.
Sorry?
Based on place of residence.
No.
You have to be an ordinary resident of Assam.
No, but that's the test. That's the test, Mulats. I'm sorry. That is the test. That test was applied between 66 and 71. And your Lordship looks at the entry in list 1. It's entry 17 of list 1.
Yes, 17.
Which is citizenship, naturalization, and aliens.
There's no doubt that Parliament has a power. There's no doubt about it.
No, I'm not only... Sorry.
Entry 17 confers and read with 245, Article 245. Parliament undoubtedly has the power to legislate.
Correct. But they were not discriminating on the basis of residence. They were not discriminating anybody on the basis of residence. They were saying only if you are resident will you get this through the process of naturalization. So they under no prohibited category. And there's another very interesting feature as far as Assam is concerned. Assam has 5 hill areas, scheduled areas, that were created. And there are autonomous councils, A lot of the minorities, never went to those scheduled areas. You can't buy land there. So they remained where they are. So the Muslim population percentage showed it had increased. So all these are very complex issues, How is this court going to determine all this and come to a conclusion that this is violative of 29? There is a place called Darang, a part of Darang was created as a tribal area. So the Muslim population only stayed in the other part, so that if you took Darang in its original state, the Muslim population would be less. But when the tribal area was considered, the Muslim population would be more. The point that I'm making is there are no judicial standards to determine all this. It will be a hazardous task, judicial task, for you to come to a constitutional conclusion that because of this, their cultural rights under 29, because 29 is preservation of rights. Preservation of rights assumes that there is a violation, and because of which I have a constitutional entitlement to say, issue a writ of prohibition, issue a mandamus not to allow them to violate. That's nobody's case. And it is therefore not solely attributable to migration. So that's on the 29. Now, it's absolutely tenuous connection, as my learned attorney says. Absolutely tenuous connection. One has nothing to do with the other. Very, very, very. Now, let's kindly come to now the Article 14 argument. That's even more interesting. Now, I'll assume, Malat, that 6A is struck down. Now, if 6A is struck down, what happens? Bangladesh will not take them.
As we said, this will result in a group of stateless citizens.
Total statelessness.
The joint communique, which was issued by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the then Prime Minister, clearly says that Bangladesh will take back people who had come in after 25th of March 1970.
That's correct. So Malas, you cannot, as a matter of constitutional law, Malas, and again, if you go
So you will have people in India
yes,
who have been otherwise recognized as foreigners by the Foreigners Tribunal's order, who cannot be granted Indian citizenship,
yes,
and yet who cannot be deported, though they are aliens.
That's correct. And if you go to my submission, well, just give me power of judicial review. I've dealt with it in 2-3 minutes. I'll just finish on this aspect. Kindly come, Malas, to volume 2, my submissions.
Yes, we got yours. The ones, yes, we've got your volume 2.
Volume 2. At my submissions start at page 19, but scope of judicial review is at PDF 23. In fact, may I tell you, Lordship, another thing. While this agitation was taking place in Assam, many of the people, whether Bengalis or others, moved out of Assam because they were fearing that they might be killed or hurt. Many families actually migrated to other states. So, in fact, the migration to some of the other states, Malaj, is also attributable to what the uncertainty that prevailed in the state of Assam from 1978 right till 85. And then, Malaj, as your Lordship knows, Meghalaya, Mizoram and others. So, therefore, the Muslims the minorities would not have gone to Mizoram, Meghalaya and other places, Malaj. So, it seemed that the population here increased in terms of percentages. So these are all very difficult aspects, Malaj, to analyze and come to a judicial verdict. So now if you look at Malaj's PDF 23, if you just look at what Hannah Arendt said, right to have rights. That's the right to citizenship is the right to have rights.